Hey there, how are you? This is the incredibly creatively and appropriately named Query and Schultz show here on ISC Sports Network. My name is Jake Query. This is Derek Schultz. And Derek, I'll be honest with you, I never thought I'd be doing this again. But here we are. I'm working alongside you. I guess it's our chance to once again talk about sports and everything else that people have come to love with us. Why are you just sitting there?
I'm shaking.
You have a horrifically cheesy grin on your face.
I am so excited. Can you see the goosebumps?
Okay.
You know what's great about this compared to radio, people can see us now.
Yeah. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing, Derek.
It's perfect. So I'm just 8 months of waiting for this, Jake, and to be reunited with my best friend and to give Indianapolis and Central Indiana
when does your best friend arrive?
Back what they want in Query and Schultz to quench that thirst for people. I couldn't be happier right now.
Look, it's obviously a unique time. I mean, it's a weird time, Derek, because for those that don't know, and I'm assuming that's most, here is the story of the two of us, right? So my name is Jake Query. I grew up in Indianapolis. I attended North Central High School. Derek, you are from?
Connecticut.
Trumbull, Connecticut.
I went to IU. My folks born and bred in South Bend, and so that's kind of the story, Cliff's Notes version of how I ended up out here.
And so we ended up doing a radio program together in Indianapolis that began when? When was that?
August of 2011.
There's a huge period in my mind where that's all just been blacked out. But that was, now when exactly?
August 15th, 2011 was our first day.
So that was when we began, and we had over the course of almost a decade. I mean, it's hard to say that. Remember when I told you, Derek, and you thought I was crazy. Now, I'm the older of the two of us, and so I've been through.
You don't need to specify that. We're on TV now, so people can see the gray. They know exactly what's going on.
No, that's distinguished. And by the way, you can say that I'm old, Derek. I'm not. I'm vintage. And vintage never gets old, by the way. And if you have any question about the fact how cool vintage is, I don't know why you would, but stop by the shop, which is a fabulous T-shirt store, 820 Broad Ripple Avenue, or also in Clay Terrace in Carmel, or theshopindy.com, and you can see all of their wonderful vintage shirts, whether it be the Pacers, the Colts, whether it be colleges, whether it be places like Roslyn Bakery, which is fabulous, Burger Chef, all available at theshopindy.com. Great friends of ours, and we're happy to have them on board. But, Derek, I told you that when January rolled around, the best part about that is you can put on your resume that you were at a place through that year, right? You just say, well, I worked there until 2020. Little did we know, January, 14th or 15th, something like that, I called you at 11 in the morning, and you were sitting at work?
I was coming back from downtown. I had just recorded a podcast with Greg Doyle of the Indy Star. Doyle and Derek, by the way, it goes weekly. And you called me frantically while I'm driving up to the studio.
Not frantic.
And you said, "Are you fired?" And I go, "I don't think so." And you said, "Well, I'm fired."
No,
and you need to find out if you're fired. No, you thought. Okay, see, we're going to correct this right away. I didn't expect to get 5 minutes into the show before we had our first disagreement.
We're not even 5 minutes. We're 3 minutes.
You thought that originally they might be keeping me, which actually would have been the smart play for the station, in hindsight.
Well, sure.
And I checked my email. There was nothing in there.
The price tag is always the one that gets kept, Eric. You are correct.
So I end up going in studio. Long story short, they brought us in. Brett and Mike, who are our two bosses, who I want to say, and we mentioned this on Twitter, are wonderful guys. This had nothing to do with them. This was not a local decision. This was a national thing. iHeart cut 1,000 jobs nationwide, particularly in middle markets. They gassed the entire sports staff in Louisville, Des Moines, places like that, and we felt that. And we lost, 8 people, I think, overall in our building. So it had nothing to do with ratings or revenue or anything like that, despite what maybe some people might say who don't know. But it was difficult.
You seem sensitive about
We
this.
always, well,
you seem very defensive.
I don't want anybody to lie about what happened because, yes, the show got canceled, but not canceled in the sense that we weren't good enough. It was just canceled because some idiot in New York crossed us off a spreadsheet.
That's not even in New York.
Why didn't it happen?
That's not where they're based.
Yeah, they are.
No, they're not.
They used to be San Antonio, then they moved to New York.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Did that happen before or after?
That's part of the reason why they had to cut us. The real estate in New York City is far more expensive for those big fancy
not even
buildings.
Working in there anymore.
That's
right. So I woke up. It was the day after, or the morning after, the Clemson LSU National Championship game. And for those that don't know, I am a huge Clemson football
Which feels
fan.
like 100 years ago.
It does, for a number of reasons. So I just kept having these Joe Burrow plays going through my mind, and things that happened in the game, and I'm trying to sleep, and I'm an insomniac by nature anyway. I'm not a morning person at all. So I'm trying to sleep. I can't sleep. Finally, at 4:30, I fall asleep. I just happen to wake up at 10 or something like that, and I have a message saying, you need to meet with the general manager as soon as possible. Well, I've been around the ringer, so I knew what that meant immediately. So I called him and said, hey, is it me or is it me and Derek? And he said, no, it's basically about everybody. So I knew right then. So then I said, okay. And I do recall this. He said to me, I really need you in here in the next 30 minutes. And again, I'm not a morning person. And I said, if I'm later than that, are you going to fire me? And he said, well, that's a good point. Just get in when you can. So on my way in, I made 3 phone calls. One was to my mom because I figured I better tell my parents before my mom gets on the Indy Star. The second, I made a phone call. And then third was you. And I think I probably did phrase it under, like, have you been fired yet? Because you were in there, right?
Yeah.
Or you were on your way in?
I was on my way in, and I had not had any contact at all with them.
Right.
But, yeah, since you had been through it before, I mean, you've been fired, 6 or 7 times? I've lost count.
I've got my doctorate.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm right in saying it was much more difficult for me because this was not something that I had ever experienced before. You know, whether it be with jobs or girlfriends, I'd never experienced, hey, I don't want to be with you anymore.
Well,
you know what I mean? That's never happened.
Yeah, you'd never had a girlfriend.
Yeah, and I'd been dumped multiple times. And this was a lot like getting dumped. It was a lot like getting, like, there is a grieving process that goes through with that. And so for, like, the next 4 days, I didn't eat or drink anything. I think I lost, like, 10 pounds, which for me is a lot to lose, you know, because I'm really, as you guys can see, thank God we're on TV right now. I'm very fit and muscular.
Sure.
And but no, seriously, I also wanted to specify that the last 8 months for us, and specifically for me, have been a lot like what the last 8 months have been for you guys at home. It has not been a vacation for me. It's been probably the most difficult 8 months of my adult life. And it goes hand in hand with everything happening at once, getting laid off, and then the pandemic. And my wife is a nurse at Methodist Hospital and being on the COVID unit, and we had to keep my son away from my parents for 3 months, and I'm basically in isolation. It was a lot to go through, and it was a heavy burden to carry for those months. So I am, you know, do I have goosebumps? Not actually, but I am really excited to start this because it just feels like there's a sense of normalcy that I wanted to return to my life with this show.
Well, I think, you know, once the show went away, and, you know, we're thankful to be able to pick that back up again, but I think it's natural, and most people would just assume that it would be more difficult on you than on me because you're being denied me. I'm being denied you. I mean, you know, so therefore.
If you want to do this, we can. I had several, more than 3 opportunities to do solo projects. And I was very close to accepting one. I'm not going to say who it was. I think those details are going to remain a secret. And I got a tearful phone call from you that said, look,
sure,
buddy, I understand that I'm tied to you, and I can't do this without you. So please, I'm almost 50, or you just turned 50, right? You just had a birthday. Okay.
48 years old.
I'm almost 50. My star is fading, and I need somebody who's still ascending.
Okay.
And so I kind of added everything up, and because we've been so close over the years, I thought, you know what, I am going to stick around with Jake and deny these other opportunities and say, you know what, no thanks, I want to keep Query and Schultz alive. So that's why we're still here doing this.
So tell me what you have done, Derek Schultz, since, you know, COVID basically hit, March, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Rudy Gobert, and we'll get into this. I mean, I recall this. I was set to go to St. Petersburg, Florida for the first NTT IndyCar Series race of the year because I work on the IndyCar radio network. And the night before I was – and, I mean, the coronavirus had started to get into the conversation, right? I mean, you started to hear about this virus and
social distancing and hand sanitizer.
But I mean, before that, like before we knew, I mean, I really, like probably most people, when I heard about the coronavirus, was like, yeah, I mean, we've been through this, right? I remember the Ebola thing,
swine flu,
yep. and I mean, I'm not taking away from the severity of those things, but it started to get into the conversation, and all of a sudden, I'm watching television and I see Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz has tested positive. And literally within an hour, the NBA season is canceled. Or obviously we now know postponed. But at the time it was, hey, we are shutting it down right now. And that was a domino that, I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. All of a sudden it's just you're hearing left and right of, this is going to be, the NCAA tournament now, or actually at that time it was the Big Ten tournament, was being played here in Indianapolis, and that, we'll see what happens. And Fred Hoiberg is sweating on the sidelines. And
Yeah,
people
remember
are
that?
wearing
Yikes.
hazmat suits around him. So I got up the next morning, and I'm sitting at the airport in Indianapolis on my way to St. Pete, and everyone's asking the same question. Are we going down to a race that's not going to happen? What's going on here? And I got to St. Petersburg. The very first practice session was Friday morning. I was not on that session, so I slept in. And then I wake up and I check my phone, and there's an email. IndyCar has been postponed all the way through to May, and of course we know what happened since then, but literally within like a 48-hour period, seemingly the world just stopped.
Yeah.
And then to your point, the social distancing, the hand washing. What do you recall in terms of what you did? You were in a unique situation because your wife is at a hospital. She's coming home.
Yeah.
You have a young child. What did you do to pass the time other than consistently text me freaking out about what your professional career was going to be?
Well, if we're talking specifically that week, what do they usually tell people to do around the time of the NCAA tournament? Let's say if you're in your mid-30s and you and your wife have decided, hey, we're not going to have children anymore. What do they usually tell people to do around that time?
Oh, I forgot. You went ahead and made that decision to go ahead and get the snip.
So
right?
I'm thinking, hey, I have no job. I'm going to sit around and watch basketball all day. Let's do my vasectomy. I don't know. Okay. Let's do it. The Big Ten tournament
and
week.
you're giving this kind of intimate detail
you
to
asked
people.
me.
Derek, 90% of the people watching this don't even know who we are.
You asked
All
me.
they know is that now they're seeing a guy who just went in for a vasectomy. That's what they know.
So I was standing in line at a pharmacy to get medication, antibiotics, post-vasectomy when I found out that everything was getting shut down. So
literally.
I was
right?
laid off. I got snipped, and then the one thing that the first time I'd been looking forward to something in like 2 months, that gets taken away from me too. So that's what ended up happening. But
being the basketball or that being the procreation.
So I was on the couch and frozen peas and all that stuff for the first couple of days. That's how I spent the time. But the days just crawled, and even now, Jake, it just feels like we've had a progressively warmer March. Right? There wasn't really a spring and a summer. It just felt like the same thing kind of repeating over and over again. But I was with my son almost all the time until the end of March when I decided I got to get out and do something just for my mental health. I've got to, I started busting tables when I was 15. I've never really not worked. So after 8 weeks, I was just getting cabin fever. So I decided.
Cabin?
Are you in a cabin? I live in Midtown in a nice house.
Is it log?
So
How could you get cabin fever if you're in a house?
So I tried to target a
But you
job.
like log cabin syrup. Your wife's from Vermont, but you like log cabin syrup, right?
Are you going to let me tell the story?
Well, you do like log cabin. Just admit it.
I like it better than the real maple syrup, yeah.
Okay.
And I almost was disowned from my Vermont in-laws because of that.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to identify companies. Okay, who do I want to link up with? And you may have heard of a company called Amazon, which has been very, very successful, and Jeff Bezos is worth, billions of dollars, and I decided that's kind of who I want to link up with. So I sent them my resume. They said they were really impressed by my work experience, more so that I could lift 25 pounds or more, and they brought me in, so I became
Is it because your resume said 2020 for your last job? You see, you
That's right, yeah, that actually did help.
So, wait a minute. So you got a job?
Yeah, I've been working.
They've made like $460 trillion since the pandemic itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're hiring everyone, right?
No, they've been very selective about their hiring. I wouldn't say that they were hiring everyone at all. No, they've been rejecting plenty of people.
Amazon, if I'm not mistaken, are they based in Seattle?
I think so.
That's where they started.
Yeah.
And then
I believe the world headquarters is Seattle.
But then they had, was it D.C. or the New York City area? I think it's D.C. where they have like this second headquarters. None of this factors into Indianapolis. So how are you working corporately for Amazon?
Well, I'm not working corporately for Amazon. I'm working in a warehouse at Amazon up on the northwest side. DIN1, what up?
So you're scanning, or what do you do exactly?
I do all kinds of stuff.
Are you riding on a conveyor belt?
I do anything. No, that you get fired. One guy did that and was asked not to come back. But we are the last line before the packages go out. So everything that comes to us is already sealed. We just do final scans for same day deliveries. And I do that for 25 hours a week. Yeah.
Do you enjoy it?
I do. I actually just like working. Honestly, it's a lot of people that
I think we just found the key cornerstone difference between you and myself.
It's a lot of people that are kind of like me, where there was a guy that I work with named Brian who's a session drummer, and all of his gigs got canceled, so he had to do what he had to do. I worked with another guy who was a DJ, and everything got gassed out. And then you've got guys that are, one kid that I work with is an IUPUI student that tells me about his weekly exploits at Tiki Bob's. So you have those people that are in there as well. But I've never been ashamed to work. You know what I mean? I don't take myself very seriously at all. And it really wasn't a financial thing for me as much as it just was a mental health thing. Like I love my son and I love my family, but I just had to get out of the house at least a couple of hours a week and feel productive.
I'll tell you something that is probably going to sound really weird and make no sense. And I hope it doesn't offend anybody. I understand the severity of what we have gone through, both from a health standpoint. I know people, unfortunately, who we lost due to COVID. I know there will be more, sadly and tragically. I know from an economic standpoint what it has meant. So I don't wish any of that. I'm not. But I have actually enjoyed and found a peace in the last 7 months, because I really felt like we were as a society getting too, and maybe we didn't realize it as we were going through it, but I just felt like our priorities were out of whack. And then all of a sudden there was kind of this, it was almost like from March 15th to whenever, probably mid-June, I felt like it was Christmas break for 2 straight months. And by that I mean all of a sudden you are basically forced to spend your time around the people closest to you, and the people that through the pace of life you only saw so many hours a day, and you're wiped out and whatever else. And all of a sudden there was this simplicity that we culturally had to return to. Playing board games, doing jigsaw puzzles, cooking at home, and just kind of resetting everything. And I'm glad that we're coming out of that, don't get me wrong. But I did feel like psychologically it was almost necessary. And I know that that's crazy, and I hope it doesn't offend people. But I didn't, Derek, there wasn't sports for us to talk about, number one. But I didn't necessarily miss the day-to-day of going in. I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to go in each day and have something to talk about. And then with sports itself, once it came back, in the Indianapolis 500 in August and the Kentucky Derby in early September, it was all weird. No doubt about it. And there are many things that you realize how important the date equity is, the Indianapolis 500 being one of them. I was fortunate to be able to be there to call the race. And once the race began, seeing the cars come down the backstretch and into turn 3, it was the same. For me, it was the same hype. But admittedly, like the night before and things like that, it's not May. And things just felt different. And I'm curious for you. You're a baseball fan. You used to scam people in the mail selling baseball cards, right?
I only scam people who scam me.
Wow.
I scam the scammers.
Okay, sure. Right. So you were a Yankees fan growing up.
Yes.
Now, I was excited. I grew up a Reds fan. When Major League Baseball came back, I was excited to watch games because of that normalcy. But the first couple of games, and I thought it sounded like the hokiest thing in the world when they said they were going to pipe in crowd noise. And the first couple of games, I watched it, and there was no crowd noise, and it was flat. And I just thought, I can't watch this. And I will be honest with you, and maybe this isn't smart for me to sit here and admit on a show that we're doing where we're supposed to be talking about sports, but for the most part, I couldn't run down for you right now the Major League Baseball standings. Couldn't. I know the Reds have really struggled. I know the Cubs are good. I know the Cardinals, like at one point, had played 4 games and everybody else had played 30. And I know that, Tatis Jr. is having a great year. So I know the nuts and bolts, but are you following on a day-to-day basis?
No, and that's another thing for me. I kind of mentally checked out a lot with sports and refocused on the things that really matter. Not that sports matter. We're both passionate sports guys. You guys watching, I know, are as well. So I feel like I'm a little bit behind too, honestly.
So you think people watching are passionate Query and Schultz fans?
Oh, 100%.
No. We both know, Derek, that's not at all accurate. They're fans of sports.
You heard the fireworks going off over the weekend. That's It's September. Why would people be shooting fireworks? It's because word had leaked out that this show was coming back.
No, I think actually the Ravenswood fireworks show that's normally in July, they just moved it. Once they had to
no, I don't think we'll fact check that. But honestly, Jake, you say that you don't miss it. I can think of a time where you did miss it because I know I missed it, and I thought if I missed it because of this, you absolutely do. It was very hard for us not to have a platform. Yeah, we had our Twitter accounts, but not to have a show platform during the pandemic into the protests with these local businesses, bars and restaurants, who particularly we have a connection with on the show, to not try to be out there to help. I think those people in those places, that really pained me.
I would agree with that. I thought when protesting, and I understand certainly why, right? When protesting got underway, I understood it. And I also understood that this was just my opinion, and not to get too far into it because I know that there are a lot of people that it drove them away. It became very exhausting. The politics and the bickering and the nonstop back and forth. When it came to race relations demonstrations, I had a lot of people that asked me, they're like, hey, do you wish you were on the radio right now so that you could talk about what's going on? And my initial thought was, I really don't, because I don't know that my voice is necessarily one that is necessary, because right now, because of, and I'm talking about going back a couple of months when everything first started, it was finally time for the people of color in this country to have their voice be heard. And I don't know that they needed someone who was not in that category to be chiming in to drown. And I mean that respectfully towards it, not in a bad way. I thought it was time for me to listen and not to talk. And in that regard, I felt okay being away. But you are correct. I love downtown Indianapolis. One of the things that I did during the time away, and I had reached out to do this like in April, and then obviously couldn't in April, and so that got pushed into, I think it was August. But I did what I called, Derek, and I want to thank Hotbox Pizza for helping me do this, 30 lunches in 30 days. So I went and sat and had lunch with a different homeless person through the Wheeler Mission every day for 30 days. And that really opened my eyes to the things that go into putting people in plight. Some of them are circumstantial. Some of them are based on bad decisions. There are a number of factors that go into it. But because of that, I'd like to think that it increased my empathy or understanding of people, for example, that are homeless. And when you look at what happened in downtown Indianapolis, the demonstrations, the destruction, the looting, I went down the day after the very first night of demonstrations and seeing spray paint on the Soldiers and Sailors Monument and seeing the destruction, Windsor jewelry, the different places that were so impacted and affected. And I felt this dichotomy inside of me because the message that created this fury to many people, I understood. And I agree with the frustration that they're feeling. Obviously, I don't agree with the manner in which they're dealing with it. And that parlayed into, when you combined it, was like this imperfect storm, because you had that. Then you had the fact that because of COVID, the shelters in downtown Indianapolis were unfortunately having to put a limitation on the number of people they could take in, which leads to more people that otherwise would have housing or transitional housing being out on the street. So you combine now the fact that you have buildings with no glass in them, you have people with no roof over their head that are on the street itself, and you have, I'm going to throw a wild number out there, 65% of office spaces in Indianapolis that are normally occupied with people doing Zoom calls because they're doing work from home because of the pandemic. And now all of a sudden downtown Indianapolis becomes 1985 all over again, with, the problem of the less fortunate on display and the anger on display. And all of it became, for me, very difficult as an Indianapolis native. I don't know, though, Derek, how we navigate through that without just simply time, because with the virus out there, a lot of that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, we definitely have an uphill climb, and I do wonder, companies like Salesforce, are we ever going to go back to the way that it was, where all of those guys and gals are pouring out of the Salesforce building into and around the Mile Square to go grab lunch, and now that's going away at least until 2021, if not forever.
You know, I remember years ago when I worked in television, and when I first started working in television at the local level, I worked in a department and I was fortunate that they had 7 people in the department because I was the 7th, because I was entry level. And then over the course of time, through attrition and changes and other such things, eventually it got to the point where we had 2 people. And one day I remember stopping and saying, they're never going to hire 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 again, because we're getting away with this. Mm-hmm. We're able to turn out the product with just 2 of us, and the overhead is that much. That's what I really think when we look, Derek, 75 years from now, the dwelling pattern in American culture is going to be, this is a boulder in the stream, in my opinion, because you have downtown office buildings that now are working into going an entire quarter with no one going into the office, and they look at it and say, wait a minute, we're getting 85% of our production, and we've eliminated 25% of our overhead because we're not paying $22,000 a month.
Do we need this big fancy building?
Right.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And so then, as a result of that, you have a young person that's graduating from college that takes a job in Chicago or New York or Indianapolis and wants to live downtown because it's walking distance to their office building and yada, yada. Well, now all of a sudden, they're saying, well, no, you can actually work here from anywhere. Well, how many people now are going to say, you know what? With what we've been through for the last 4 months, I'm tired of the rat race. I'm going to move out of New York City and Manhattan where I'm paying $3,600 a month in rent, and I'm going to go back home to Kearney, Nebraska, and buy an acre of land and log into my laptop every day to go to work. And how is that going to change? If this ruins my retirement master plan of my acreage in Wyoming with my 7 rescue dogs, I'm going to be living.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that you'd start that in February, honestly. But
that was in the works.
But this is great. I mean, we've got to get to a timeout, but this is great because this show, it's beyond sports. We talk about local issues and things like that. So
we're done with
that's
that.
why
Let's
people love Corey and Schultz.
People want to hear about sports. Should we get back to that
Yeah,
next?
we're going to talk some Colts when we come back. It's Corey and Schultz, ISC Sports Network, brought to you by the Shop Indy.
The drive, the take, fouled, and it goes!
Lobbing it to the back of the end zone. They're going to say it's a touchdown. That ball wiggles in and into the back of the net.
We're a different breed, aren't we? While others rest, we choose to work. Where others are content, we stay hungry. They may not see us coming, but we know exactly where we're going. You won't rest until you succeed. Neither will we.
Your life is on the go. Now your viewing habits can be on the go. With the ISC Sports Network app, your team is at your fingertips. You can download years' worth of content from the ISC Sports Network library. High school, college, special events, weekly and monthly shows, wherever you find your favorite app. And you can always find out more information at iscsportsnetwork.com.
Welcome back to the exciting relaunch of Corey and Schultz here on ISC Sports Network. I'm Derek Schultz. Jake Query's here as well.
Rocketship yet? I'm a little disappointed in that.
I was hoping. I forgot to bring the anvil for our studio, so we'll make sure that we do
mask
that.
on? I need to come over closer to you. I'm wearing my Winners Drink Milk mask that we got because we co-emceed or actually I emceed and you rode along for the fastest rookie luncheon.
That's right.
Renus VK.
That was our first official appearance back after our non-compete ran out.
So I'm going to come stand by you because I want everybody to see my shirt.
Oh, you're going to be the male model for this? Vintage never gets old. It's from the Shop Indy. If you go online, theshopindy.com, you can check out their selection.
You can just tell people you're vintage.
The shop has been bringing sports and hometown apparel to the Indy area since 2011, and we've got some of their selections right in front here.
I don't think people can hear you.
That are fantastic. No, people can hear me. I project my voice very well. It's just hard because we're on TV, so I want to show people the whole package here. And when I'm the mask, that's another thing that's been hard for my mental health, hiding this. Okay. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Been very, very difficult for me.
Is it weird if I tell you that the one thing I've noticed in the mask era is how many people have really pretty eyes?
Yeah, that has been.
I've never
that
noticed
has been
that
noticeable.
before. And now all of a sudden you're like, wow, this person has really pretty eyes.
Pretty T-shirts from the Shop Indie retail locations at Clay Terrace and Broad Ripple as well. Again, the shopindie.com. And they've been partners of ours for a long, long time, and we're excited to have them over on board with us for the
I
relaunch.
used to call them turtle cookies from Roslyn. I'm not sure exactly what Roslyn called, but it's beautiful.
And I love the Marshes shirts, even though it's misspelled.
Marsh. No, it's just Marsh.
Marshes, apostrophe S.
No. It's
We're
just,
in Indiana, Jake. Kroger's, Marshes, Myers.
Okay.
You have to make sure that you get that right.
It's kind of strange to think that we are right here on the cusp of an NFL season, right?
It is weird. Yeah, Colts open up in Jacksonville, and what's weirder is that they ended last season in Jacksonville, remember, with that hideous collapse in the second half to a terrible
Like
Jaguars
7 years
team.
ago.
To finish a losing season at 7-9, and of course they've made a lot of changes since then. The Phillip Rivers signing, I think, happened 4 or 5 weeks after we were let go, and then of course the draft class with Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. A lot of people really excited about this group and what they bring to the table. I'm a little hesitant to call this team a Super Bowl contender because I'm taking a little bit of the wait and see approach, and I still think that they're clearly, at least on paper, behind Baltimore and Kansas City. But I don't think there's any reason, Jake, why this team can't be an AFC South division winner once again.
Well, I mean, first off, the AFC South, and this is no disrespect to the Colts, Derek, but almost by default. Because if you look at the other teams in the South, Tennessee's intriguing for sure. And I love Derrick Henry. I think when you have Derrick Henry, if he's healthy, you can stay in games. As Tennessee, we've seen the blueprint for what Tennessee's done. But you look at Houston, who forever we've waited to kind of take that step. They just gave Deshaun Watson $156 million. But yet they trade DeAndre Hopkins, his number one target. Houston, to me, did not appear to make steps moving forward. I could be proven wrong on that. Jacksonville, I think, is in complete rebuild tank.
Yeah, they look like they might be one of the worst teams in the league.
Correct.
But they've been a huge thorn in the Colts side. Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014, and they've gone down there and gotten kicked around a lot in that time span.
But I think for the Colts, I mean, obviously the big change is Phillip Rivers. But Phillip Rivers is a veteran who's been around a while, and I think he's pretty savvy. That's not to say that he's going to come out here and become Dan Fouts. But what I'm saying is this. This is a unique season because of the limitation of workout times, training camp, everything that goes into it, the acceleration of getting your roster ready. If you were a team, if the Colts from a year or two ago had to undergo with COVID what we've seen this year, I think there'd be a huge disadvantage for them. But their offensive line, we saw at the end of the year, it's solid. And Chris Ballard put together an offensive line that you bring everybody back, and you have some depth there, like in LaRaven Clark, who you're familiar with.
I mean, I don't know. Is that depth?
Well, but I mean,
he's a body.
It's familiarity, and supposedly he's had a really good camp for what that's worth. But my point being, the areas where football teams, it's most important to make sure that you have unity. The Colts already had that coming in, so they didn't need a camp to build their offensive line, to build the cohesion of an offensive line. Their defense is young, and maybe that area they could have used camp. But if you were a team that is in the process of a rebuild or major tweaks, this is a difficult year for you because you didn't have the time to necessarily navigate through, and you're kind of going on the fly the changes you're making. I know the Colts at quarterback, that is a huge area, but it's a quarterback who's been around a long time and is able to I think, make those adjustments necessary. So advantage Colts, in my opinion, with the craziness that's taken place in this unique year.
Yeah, I'm kind of meh overall on Phillip Rivers, but the Colts needed to move on from Jacoby Brissett. So I was open to whoever they were going to bring in because I felt like whoever they were going to bring in was going to be an improvement over what they had. You could say whatever you want about Brissett's knee and all of that. Look, he's had 3-4 seasons now at this point. We've seen everything that we needed to see with Brissett. Nice guy, great dude, great locker room leader, but a very, very average quarterback, really a QB2 in this league.
Jacoby Brissett is a very solid donut tire. When you're driving on the interstate and you get a flat tire, you put the donut tire on it, and if it's a perfectly sufficient good donut tire, you run just fine for another 15 miles until you get to where you're going and then can take it into the tire shop and get a new tire on it. But You try to run that bad boy at 70 miles an hour for 100 miles, you're going to run into some
Yeah,
issues.
and the Colts had – I don't want to make it all about Brissett because the 2019 Colts had issues that went beyond Brissett. First off, the injuries were just ridiculous, and they were playing with, T.Y. Hilton on one leg and, some old chewing gum and a ball of string basically at wide receiver, and they were trying to make that work. The offensive line was one of the few things that actually remained healthy for them last year, but they were just very limited with what they could do because he was too scared to pull the trigger and really turn it into a vertical offense. And with Rivers, you don't have to be worried about that at all. In fact, if anything, with Rivers,
Derek,
maybe he
your
pulls
point,
the trigger too much.
In defense of Jacoby Brissett, was he too scared to go to a vertical offense, or because, to your point and your words, he was throwing to chewed bubble gum and a used piece of string?
It's
or
far
whatever you
more the
called it?
first thing. He was so afraid of making a mistake that even when obvious plays were in front of them, he hesitated, and then the window evaporated. And you don't have to worry about that with Rivers. Rivers is going to make mistakes. Rivers is going to throw interceptions. But, this whole thing with Brissett, everybody wanted to talk about his touchdown-interception ratio. Well, he doesn't throw any picks. That also means he doesn't take any chances. I don't think necessarily interceptions are a bad thing. When you have as many as Jameis Winston, let's say, had last year, then, yeah, that gets into the area of it being a bad thing. But overall, you need a quarterback who's going to be aggressive, and what I've always loved about Rivers is that he is not afraid to be aggressive.
He's a riverboat gambler.
Yeah,
There's no
for
doubt
sure.
about that. Now, what he's going to have this year, which is going to be to an advantage, seemingly, is he's going to have a good running game behind him. Now, I mentioned Derrick Henry. I mean, if you've got a big-time thoroughbred clock-salting running back, a running game can be a huge advantage. But if you are completely reliant upon the three-headed monster in the backfield, or can you win that way? I personally think they probably can, but can they become too reliant on it?
I think you're trending. The league is all cyclical, right? And I think we've seen, especially with Tennessee's blueprint in the playoffs last year, you've seen maybe a little bit of a hard correct back towards the rush offense becoming more of a thing. Not, it's still about the quarterback and the passing offense and all of that, but the rush offense, 3, 4, 5 years ago was virtually irrelevant. And now I think you're starting to kind of get that to come back a little bit. So I do think that's where the Colts' bread is going to be buttered with Taylor and Mack. Marlon Mack, who we're completely forgetting about in that backfield. Right. Everybody is going nuts over Taylor, but Mack had a great year last year.
Didn't you promise last year he was going to have a 1,500-yard season?
Yeah, but he got hurt, Jake. If you actually did not per capita.
I mean, hey,
but
if we hadn't been laid off, I'd have made a lot of money.
If you gave him based on touches, it would have extrapolated to a 1,500 season for Marlon Mack. Now, he fell short of 1,500, but that was due to injuries more than anything
Nobody
else.
says hundo.
I'd like to see him compile more tutties this year.
Yeah, certainly
he was
says that.
a little short of that.
Let me say this right now, okay? We're no longer on AM radio. We're on multimedia platform, ISC Sports Network. We got to cut out the ridiculous phrases, the desperate attempts to be trendy and hip. Tutties. Done. I'm officially putting it to
You know
rest.
what? I actually kind of agree on tutties because it's a new year, it's a new show, it's a relaunch. We've actually shortened tutties to tuds. So that's what we're doing from now on.
Totally.
So I agree with
that's
you.
That's not even close.
If JT could get in like 5 tuds and Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack could get up into like the 9-10 tuds range, that'd be fine. Because you're right, tutties is a little dated. I mean, everybody kind of took tutties.
Let me tell you what I forgot to bring in, which was going to add life, character, spunk, enthusiasm to this set. And I love all of our shirts from the shop, and I love that we have, for example, right here, Ball State. Chirp, chirp, right?
Yeah.
We
Go Cards.
UIndy. Big fans
Hounds.
of UIndy. I like what UIndy does from a football standpoint. I'm sad to see, obviously, that they fell victim, as a lot of people did, to a strange year. I knocked over the IUPUI placard.
Here.
Well, I mean, this
isn't our stuff.
IUPUI.
It's not like our old studio where all the stuff was ours because they wouldn't fund us with anything else.
We've got here the trees.
That's right. Yeah.
Indiana State, who's had us do some things at City Market with them, so we like Indiana State.
And then a Pacers ball.
But what we're missing, Derek, is, and it really is accentuated our radio studio, and that's Squeaky the Clown. A beautiful painting. I'm going to bring it in for our next episode. Squeaky is fun. Kids love it. Kids love Squeaky. I mean, we got all kinds of compliments on it once you decided to put us on the internet, which lasted for 3 episodes, and then we got canned. But the one thing that we got positive feedback, kids love the Squeaky.
You know, the difference between this job and the last job is that there is no 401k or benefits that are attached to this. So I can walk at any time if I'm not comfortable with something that's going on.
You're going to go walk back to your little conveyor belt job?
And I love everybody here at ISC Sports Network and Greg Rakestraw for bringing us on, but we all have an understanding that if I feel physically threatened in any way, and that means anything involving birds or clown pictures or anything that you do, my tolerance level for your trolling is like 0 now. Okay. So it used to be like a 5 because I needed to keep the job, but now I'm just going to leave if you troll me with that. If you bring that painting in here, I'm gone.
Oh,
I'm out.
You got to admit, it's a beautiful painting.
I'm out.
People have no idea what we're talking about, but it's a wonderful clown painting that was sent
The
to us in the
hardcore
studio.
people,
And then Derek didn't like it. I thought it was it's a beautiful painting.
Yeah,
But
I don't like clowns.
So back to the Colts. The other thing that I'm curious about, as anybody is, the NFL can go without fans because of the television contract. You know, from a financial standpoint, tickets are gravy. 2,500 people at the home opener seems very odd to me.
I had the same reaction that you did. Like, at what point are you losing money to open the doors, right? But, you know, somebody brought this up on Twitter, and I wish I could give them credit for it because I think it was a way that I hadn't thought of it before. And he said that, what if this is a test run in case they let you suddenly have 5,000 or 10,000, and they can train their security and, I don't know, parking, concessions, if they're going to have them in this new COVID world, and have this kind of be the trial period, if you will, the first couple of weeks of this season?
You know, typically when the Colts, I mean, Derek, when we would do Colts pregame shows, I mean, one of the things we'd always talk about was what happened in college football the day before. Mm-hmm. And that's another complete can of worms in terms of college football. The Big Ten, the Pac-12, you know, the ACC, the SEC, and where it all is going to play out. In the Big Ten, I remember during the coaching carousel, what did you say once? That or during the realignment.
Yeah,
during the
2012, 2013.
And how did you word it in terms of the realignment and all the teams moving around?
Pac-12 commissioner threw up, and so they had to come out with the sawdust and put it down on the carousel. And
then everything stopped.
Yeah.
And the Big Ten seems to still, like, they keep trying to one kid keeps trying to kick and restart that carousel for the Big Ten. But I want to get into that. We got to get to another break. You want to talk college football?
That's right, yeah. We'll talk college football. We still have the NBA bubble and stuff to get to as well. As Query and Schultz continues the relaunch here on ISC Sports Network, brought to you by the Shop Indie.
The drive, the take, fouled, and it goes!
Lobbing it to the back of the end zone. They're going to say it's a touchdown.
Left foot gets through. Goal for Vargas. Hamilton will score!
We're a different breed, aren't we? While others rest, we choose to work. Where others are content, we stay hungry. They may not see us coming, but we know exactly where we're going. You won't rest until you succeed. Neither will we.
Shop Indie, by the way, 820 Broderpool Avenue, or also in Clay Terrace. They're actual in-store places where you can go and pick up your fabulous vintage, never gets old gear from the Shop Indie or theshopindie.com. Very happy to have them on board with us. My name is Jake Query. This is Derek Schultz. It is Query and Schultz here on ISC Sports Network. Derek, the Big Ten, you know, they were the first conference to come out and say, the presidents have voted, we're not going to play college football this year. We're not going to have fall sports. Then there started to become this wave of, well, no, that's not actually accurate. We still aren't sure. The athletic directors say one thing, the presidents say another. As it stands right now, the Big Ten's not going to play. Now, what I have always felt with college football that is the challenge here is, from a conference standpoint, you have to have uniformity. And that becomes also a state-by-state issue. So, for example, give me a conference off the top of your head.
The ACC.
The ACC. So the ACC may say, hey, you know what? We decided that we're gonna pull back on this because the state of Virginia has an increase in numbers, and as a result of that, Virginia and Virginia Tech are not going to allow their kids to play college football because those campuses are being closed. I'm using strictly hypotheticals here on these schools. But so now all of a sudden, because one state has an issue, you have two schools that are out. Or, for example, if the state of North Carolina got to that point and the governor of North Carolina or the Board of Health comes out and says, look, we can't have kids on campuses, and then that becomes a whole different talk show, because how do you have student athletes out on the field if you're not allowing students on the campus? Now, I realize we're getting into the point now where we're getting those answers. But if Wake Forest, North Carolina State, Duke, if all of them are in a state that can't go, now the ACC's lost a third of its members. It just becomes this hornet's nest. And I think the Big Ten is seeing that, Derek, because there has been continued conversation about, can the Big Ten still do this despite the president's votes? But the state of Michigan and Michigan State have said we wouldn't play. Maryland has said we're not going to play. I think Rutgers apparently 6 years ago decided they weren't going to play. But regardless, it just is too difficult to wade through, I think. And I truly believe that the Big Ten Conference, I think two things went into play with the Big Ten Conference as of now being on hold for their college football season and their fall sports. Number one, I think presidents of the universities were terrified of being the school that has, in all honesty, and I'm not trying to be, callous here. I think schools and presidents were paranoid of having a Hank Gathers situation on their field on their watch. We can talk and debate until the cows come home about whether or not the coronavirus is something that is a direct link to, or whether we're overreacting. We'll allow that for other platforms, right? As it stands right now, in my opinion, the presidents of the university felt that there was enough information, medically speaking, that all of them were terrified of the optics of that happening to one of their student athletes or on their field until we have a better feel for where things are. Whether or not you think that that's a legitimate concern of theirs, I understand that. But I think that was a legitimate point. Additionally, Derek, I think the Big Ten anticipated that they were going to be the first ones to make this decision, and then it was like a game of chicken. Two cars coming at each other, and they assumed that other conferences were eventually going to bail out. I think the Big Ten still thinks that's going to happen.
Oh, 100%. I think they thought that everybody was going to follow suit.
Correct. And I think the conferences believe that the SEC would be the last conference standing, and that at that point the SEC would say, hey, we tried it, but nobody else wanted to play, so we're going to have to shut it down. And the SEC wanted to be the holdout that looks like the tough guy that no one was willing to play with. I'm not saying that's what the SEC's thinking or that's what the SEC really is, but I think there were conferences that felt that the SEC was just bluffing and playing a game of chicken.
Even if this is the right decision for the Big Ten, I wish they would have waited a little bit longer. I think they made a real mistake in announcing it so early.
Here's the thing, Derek. This is where I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, okay? We are in September. We're in month 6 of just needing a couple more weeks. To me, you go ahead and you made that decision. Has anything other than our tolerance, has anything really changed?
No, but has this been impactful? I mean, Central Arkansas just played the other night.
I understand.
And if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm looking at that. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Central Arkansas and Navy can play, but Ohio State can't play?
No, I understand. I think
I'm not saying that, and I'm taking it very seriously and all of that. I just felt like where the Big Ten had a misstep was calling it so quickly, because even if this isn't true, it gave the illusion that they didn't try everything they could to have a season.
I think what went into their mindset, Derek, was we tried everything, but We have factored in all the variables, and the biggest variable of all, we don't anticipate being any different in November than it is in September. And I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a doctor. So it's disingenuous for me to even portray any of those. But for the sake of the discussion, I think there is certainly a lot of evidence, and who knows if it's factual? Who knows if it's going to turn out to be prophetic? But there seems to be a lot of evidence that at the very least, October and November are going to be even more challenging than August and September. And if that's the case, why not nip it in the bud? I think that was their line of thought. But I do think that the optics, and for that matter, we have entered into a liability standpoint when it comes to this because we still don't have – if you have a vaccine, then you can say, hey, you have the option of being vaccinated, and so therefore if you were to catch the coronavirus – which becomes COVID-19 or whatever it may be, you had the option to protect yourself. So we're not liable for the fact that you came to our games or you participated in our events and became ill. We haven't gotten there yet because we're still in that liability phase because we don't have that vaccine. And I know that people think a vaccine is just magically going to appear like underneath the Christmas tree. I don't know that. I don't know that anybody. And is it going to be effective? I don't know that. There are so many questions in play. I think liability and optics are as important to decision makers as anything
And
else.
it's just different with college sports than pro because the NBA, these guys are professionals. You can take them, you can send them to freaking Jupiter and say, this is where you're playing.
That would be challenging.
And we're going to have a bubble right here. But with college sports, look, we all know amateurism is a sham, right? But if you're going to try to keep up the illusion of amateurism.
Does Jupiter have rings or is that Saturn?
That's Saturn.
Jupiter has rings too, though, doesn't it?
I don't think so.
I think it does. I think they recently discovered that Jupiter has rings. I think it is.
No, I'm
Pluto,
going back
has
to
rings.
third grade. I don't think that's right.
No, I think Jupiter does. You should look it up. It has the big storm. Right?
If you suddenly,
who would be really good on Jupiter would be St. John's because they're the red storm, right?
If you suddenly take
that's a home game for them.
all of these kids.
See, think about that. That's their home. That's their home,
Okay.
right?
Can I go here?
Okay.
If you suddenly take all of these
people in
kids
Jupiter are huge fans of St.
off
John's.
of campus and you put them in an isolation situation, they can't see their girlfriends and all of that. And yeah, they get cost of attendance and scholarships and all of that.
UCLA would be really good at Saturn. 10 rings, right?
I still really
Isn't
think
that right?
that
So Saturn, UCLA would be like a home game for them.
you're hurting amateurism, but the facade of that by doing that because you're treating all of these kids like professionals at that point. And you can't sit here and say, well, they're student athletes and all of that, and yet do everything different for them compared to every other student that's on campus. Even the athletes are on campus because the other fall sports aren't happening.
Pluto, that's not a planet anymore, right? They were D1, and then they've been knocked down to NAIA.
That's been for like 10 years now.
But they're back. But then there are people trying to get them back to D1. Right?
They got, to use a Greg Rakestraw term, they got relegated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think they're back. I think Pluto's back.
I don't think that's right.
No, I think it is. You should look it up.
I've had 8 months to read everything I could get my hands on, Jake, and I'm telling you, I did not read that.
Did you get a
anywhere.
lot of books on Pluto? Did you?
You know what? I've gotten through 4 of the Harry Potter audiobooks, which are all
books.
Well, yeah, I just listened to them at work.
Oh, on your conveyor belt.
Well, I have AirPods, and I put those in.
You're not allowed to.
to
You're not allowed to
Order the
wear the
Phoenix.
AirPods at work, are you?
They leave me alone because of my brand.
Okay.
They know who I am over there.
Is the Harry Potter? So you're not reading the books. You're listening to the books.
Yeah.
That's kind of cheating.
No, I don't think so.
think
I
it
listened
is.
to them at 1.5.
I was an
speed.
English major, and if any of the books that I was supposed to read were available at Blockbuster, then that's how I read them.
Problem is,
But it's
each book
cheating.
is about 22 hours, so it takes a while to get through.
Is it a British accent?
It is, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the narrator does, and he does all the voices.
Okay.
Like Hermione is the girl's voice, and then he'll do, Hagrid and
Yeah, we have
Ron
people-
and Harry and
Listen.
the whole group.
We have 9 people watching right now, 2 of which may be female, and they're now gone.
Harry Potter's a big deal. Quarian Schultz is a big deal. Like, we're aligning
But you've
brands
already read the Harry
with
Potter
everything.
books, right?
Yes, but
So
I
then
wanted
why
to-
would you listen to them?
Well, I feel like I retain the information a little bit better.
Maybe you should actually be getting books about planets to listen to.
I guess so.
You can
But I
find
did-
out.
I'm telling
Did
you,
you
I did
look
not hear that
online?
thing about
I think
Pluto.
Jupiter has rings.
We've got Bite or Bull Bleep to get to.
Well, that'll be fun. I'm
Bringing that back.
I'm sure people are clamoring for that.
Heck yeah. We're going to do that next as we wrap up on the relaunch edition of Quarian Schultz. ISC Sports Network brought to you by the Shop Engine.
We're a different breed, aren't we? While others rest, we choose to work. Where others are content, we stay hungry. They may not see us coming, but we know exactly where we're going. You won't rest until you succeed. Neither will we.
Brewer jams it home.
That ball wiggles in and into the back of the net.
A little fireworks in the first half. Throw it up for Tillman. Whoa, my goodness.
122.60 for Penn. What a swim. Six of them.
Welcome back. It's the relaunch of Query and Schultz here on ISC Sports Network. I'm Derek Schultz. Jake Query here as well. This portion of the show brought to you by our friends at WGU Indiana. Jake, we've even got the mug.
Derek,
right here.
Seen the Kermit the Frog meme?
That's right. Yeah, sipping tea.
Yes, this is going to be me sipping tea every time you're talking and you're saying something I don't care about.
Oh, I thought you were going to bring up the fact that
surprisingly affordable WGU.
we got fact-checked about Jupiter having rings.
Student-obsessed WGU. We didn't get fact-checked. I was correct. It has rings.
Since 2010, more than 10,000 Hoosier lives have been changed with a degree from WGU Indiana, including my wife.
Unmatched results. WGU.
The state's affordable, accredited online university, WGU Indiana believes that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And in honor of its 10th anniversary, WGU Indiana will create more pathways between talent and opportunity with the 10th anniversary scholarship. How about that? The online university will award a $10,000 scholarship to 10 newly enrolled students. To apply and learn more, just head to indiana.wgu.edu.
Here's what I love about WGU being on board with us, Derek, because as you said, they believe talent is universal. And so what better thing to do than to be able to display on this fine program that talent may be universal, but it clearly is not interchangeable because it exists on one half of this set, right?
Yeah, that's why you called me in the middle of the night begging me to stay with you to keep Query and Schultz alive. I love WGU Indiana. I'm not a big fan of the owl. I'll be honest
the
about
owl's
that.
wonderful.
Yeah, not a big fan. Their wings are silent when they swoop in on their
Do
prey.
you know owls actually can turn their head 360 degrees?
Yeah, it's just awful.
That's not awful at all.
They're awful beasts.
No.
They're not number one on my list. Pelicans are the most fearsome of all predatory birds, but owls are up there.
It's ridiculous.
So I wish they would change that. I don't know. Maybe we can put in a call to Corey and see if he can't change that around.
Okay. I doubt they'll take your advice on that. By the way, speaking of Pelicans, they were one of the teams that were invited into the NBA bubble despite not being like in playoff contention at the time. Everybody said, well, it's because they want Zion Williamson there. I have actually enjoyed watching the NBA games. Here's what I want to know.
Me too.
Here's what I want to know about the NBA bubble, okay? The NBA's done a remarkable job of taking these courts. I mean, you forget this is basically the hyper, right? Mm-hmm. It's just an open. So they take these courts and then you have the virtual wall behind with the fans. I want to know what it looks like. Can somebody just send a picture of what it looks like in actuality? Like, is there a black curtain there that the players?
Do you know Jeff Sherman at IUPUI? He's part of the Pacers scoring crew, and he's down there in Orlando at the scores table. So he's had a center court seat to most of these games, and he has put up photos on his Facebook of what it looks like, and it's literally just a screen behind the benches where the virtual fans are.
Okay, so that is up against like where the benches are?
It's behind the benches.
Is it like a green curtain or a screen?
No, I think it's just like a LED board or something like that, where they can just superimpose those images on there. And it looks like there's a little bit of stands for. Remember, some of the players have been able to bring their families and babies to some of the games, and then the coaching staff and the trainers and things like that.
You know, I know that the images on the floor, like when the Pacers had a home game, and you'd see the Pacers logo and the sponsors on the floor. That's all superimposed, so it's just a blank floor. But I've watched a lot of the bubble. I have become friends with a gentleman who is a huge fan, Derek, of the Miami Heat. And he's asked me to come over a couple times to watch the Heat games. Let me tell you, you are going to think I'm crazy here. Are you ready? And I texted this to Chris Denari 2 weeks ago and kept it for my receipt.
You think they're going to go to the finals?
I think the Miami Heat could win it all. They are very similar to the Rip Hamilton Detroit Pistons teams and the fact that the sum is better than the individual parts. But Eric Spoelstra has blossomed. Obviously, we're seeing now he's a very, very good coach. And maybe he was a good coach when he had Boss Wade and LeBron. But, the thought was he just rolled the ball out because he had the three best players. Their offensive fluidity, their spacing on the floor, their ability to get open shots is all complemented by the fact that they have 5 guys on the floor that can all hit from anywhere. And Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy.
Pride of York, Maine.
He's unbelievable from the outside.
Yeah, he's great. Bam Adebayo having the big season that he had. I really thought – I remember watching Bam at UK, and I thought, this guy, he's not going to make it. And I thought he was kind of a stiff, and he's turned into a fantastic
very good player.
NBA player. And say what you want about Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler will rip your freaking heart out and show it to you. Like, that dude is a killer, and you need to have that guy. The
other two players that have been really good for them, and I realize we don't need to sit here and talk the Miami Heat forever, but Kelly Olynyk he's one of those Johnny on the spot guys, and then Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero's been fantastic as a rookie. But the reason I bring up the Heat is because you look right now at the fact that, depending on when you're watching this, but as of right now, they got a 3-1 lead on Milwaukee. They have really controlled those games. The first 3 games, they controlled from tip to buzzer, and they did the same thing against Indiana. So the Pacers, Derek, yes, it was disappointing to be swept. It felt like in the bubble, all bets were off because you don't have the home court, all those things. You don't have travel time. It's like pickup basketball that ESPN and the NBA have done a remarkable job in TNT of making and making it look and sound real, or it is real, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's an actual arena. For the Pacers, I know it was disappointing, but I think that softens the blow a little bit of getting swept. That you have a team that won over 60 games in Milwaukee with one of the best players in the game in Giannis, and they're facing the exact same fate against Miami. Miami plays so well together, but the Pacers now making a coaching change. And there's a lot of question about where Indiana goes from here. I'll start it off. I want you to respond. I don't believe Victor Oladipo is still the guy. The Pacers may think that. I don't personally believe that. I think Oladipo, I don't know. I needed to see that Victor Oladipo's tremendous year in his first year at Indiana was not the anomaly of his career. And I know that he's coming off of the injury. But I don't know that he's ever again going to be that player. I don't know that I don't know that we've seen enough body of work to say definitively that year was not the anomaly, and that he was just in the zone for whatever it may be, however you want to call it. I also think that Victor Oladipo, not unlike what happened to Paul George, and neither of this makes these guys bad guys, and they're both very talented players. But I think Victor Oladipo has fallen victim to the same thing that Paul George did, and that is that he is more worried about Victor Oladipo, the brand, wearing the cute fanny packs, going on singing shows, putting out albums. I think he's more concerned about that, maybe not more concerned, but equally concerned with that as he is Victor Oladipo, the basketball player. And maybe that's unfair, and maybe Victor Oladipo will say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't know. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a very good player. I don't think he's a franchise player. And if you can, at this point, before his contract is up, parlay that into getting yourself other pieces and then figure out where you want to go. Domas Sabonis is a very, very good player. Do you win in today's NBA by building around a 4 or a 5? I don't know about that. But I liked what I saw from T.J. Warren in the bubble. Maybe that was a little bit of an anomaly. I think Jeremy Lamb in his mid-range game is something that they missed. Aaron Holiday has shown that he has some ability to get good minutes
at
moving
least a
forward.
Rotational piece. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, rotational pieces. And then Miles Turner becomes a question mark. But that's where and who you get as a coach, and I believe that Mike D'Antoni will be in the discussion. I don't think Mark Jackson will be in the discussion. I think it's possible they go the college route. I think it's possible Billy Donovan, if he doesn't re-sign with Oklahoma City, is in the discussion. But that's where I feel like Indiana is in kind of this flux situation.
You got to bring an offensive guy in. It's too much. You had Vogel, who was a defensive guy. You had Nate, who was a defensive guy. And you had an offense that was stuck in 1995. You just can't have that anymore. The Pacers were dead last in the league at three-point attempts. They were terrible at getting to the free throw line. If you're going to be a two-point offense in 2020, you're screwed. Like that's not how you win basketball. And I feel for McMillan a little bit because the Pacers have personnel to have a 2-point offense. They don't have the personnel to be the Rockets.
Right.
You can't play a style that you don't have the pieces for. But the Pacers need to trend that way and keep up with the Joneses in a modern NBA. I'm not saying shooting 53s a game, but they've got to shoot more than what they've been shooting so far. I love Kenny Atkinson. He ended up getting let go in Brooklyn, but he's a D'Antoni disciple in Brooklyn. Sorry. Some people will get that reference. But he's a D'Antoni disciple, a big analytics guy, a three-point guy. But you need to really shake this roster up. I'll say it definitively. Victor Oladipo will never be the player again that he was in 17-18. In his defense, he was hurt the next year and then ruptured the patella. And then, of course, was hurt coming back from the bubble and everything that happened this year. So Oladipo's never really had the chance to prove that he's not that guy. But I think just what has been zapped from him injury-wise, he'll never be that player again.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, and I know it will be mocked unmercifully. Okay? If Boston were to win it this year, which is a possibility.
Oh, no.
Maybe not a probability, but a possibility.
I know where you're going.
I'm not saying Brad Stevens is sitting there looking at the Indiana job. But if Boston were to win it this year, and that mountain has been climbed for Brad Stevens with the Celtics, if you are Herb Simon, do you say to Kevin Pritchard, call Brad Stevens' agent and find out between the buyout and his salary, what will it cost me to get him here?
Oh, of course you say that. Does it happen, though?
Understood.
Right? And that's another thing with D'Antoni. There's no salary cap when it comes to coaches. D'Antoni's price tag, if Houston lets him walk, which I don't think is going to happen, but let's say that he's out there.
It depends on what happens with Houston.
I just don't think that D'Antoni is a realistic option for the Pacers. A, they don't have the pieces, and B, I don't think they're willing to spend the money that it's going to take for them to get him.
What's D'Antoni going to cost you? $5 to $7 million, right?
Yeah, probably. I just don't think that they're going to pay that.
You? 2.5?
Yeah, half that, yeah, probably. I just don't think that they're going to end up paying that. But this is a good segue into Bite or Bull Bleep, which we're going to wrap up the show with. All right. Bite or Bull Bleep was our most popular segment.
No, it was horrible.
And one of the most popular segments, in fact, in sports radio history.
It was a wildly unpopular and not surprisingly unsponsored Bite or Bull Schultz.
So here's what we do.
We had a sponsor for it, but it's terrible.
I make a statement. Way to go and sell it there. I make a statement.
Where is our sounder for that?
And then we go, well, we don't have one yet.
Oh, wait a minute.
Pretty soon we're going to have sponsors knocking down the door
here
at
One of the things
ISC
people
Sports
loved
Network
about it was the sound effect
to sponsor
of the bull.
ISC Sports
People
Network.
loved the bull sound effect.
So here's what we do if you're new
kids,
to this.
We did some research in the market.
I'm explaining the
kids
rules.
Loved Oriole the Bull.
I give a statement. Jake and I go back and forth whether we buy it or it's Bull Bleep. You ready for statement one?
Yeah, I'm pulling.
Statement one: the Colts will win 12 games this season. Buy it or Bull Bleep?
12 games.
Yep.
So you're saying 3/4 of their games?
I don't know, 12 or more. Maybe let's put it that way so we don't hyper focus on 12.
The rudimentary way in which we can do, with computers and everything.
You're not going to throw that into the microphone, are you?
Oh yeah,
off of your cell phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the sound of the angry bull. When I think something is Bull Schultz, I play the sound of a bull, right? Mm-hmm. The Colts 12 games, 12 wins this year.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
No,
this is a professional operation. This is a TV show, Jake.
Sure,
you have to treat it as such.
That is wonderful.
We're not on AM radio anymore.
Look, one could make the argument that there's not even a guarantee the Colts play 12 games this year.
Let's assume that there's a 16-game season.
No, I do not think they will win 12 games. Their schedule, playing in the AFC South, is going to be favorable this year. I mean, Tennessee's going to be good. It's always tough when you go one of those in Houston, but I still don't think they're going to win 12.
Houston has by far the best quarterback in the division, so I can't see Houston bottoming out. I don't think Houston's going to be like a 6-10 team. I also don't think that they're going to be a 12-4 team. No, I think the Colts fall short of that. If I had to pick, I'd say 10.
Are you familiar with things falling short?
No, I'm not actually. I cross high bars every single day. Statement number 2, Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis will no longer be teammates next NBA season.
I actually buy that. I buy that. I think that what the Pacers learned is that it's difficult, and nothing against either of those two guys. I think Sabonis is a wonderful player. I think Miles Turner is a really good player for what Indiana wanted to do. They wanted to predicate and set the tone of their games and their offense based on their defense and his rim protection. But if you're getting away from being a defensive-oriented team, as I think maybe Indiana is, and trying to be more open offensively, you've got to get – what did we talk about, Derek, with the Miami Heat? Or, you look at really even the Lakers. You watch the Lakers, Anthony Davis is shooting from 18 feet out, right? You name the team, and essentially you have 5 mid-range to three-point shooters spread out throughout the floor. Sabonis has decent range, but he obviously it's on the block. You can't take him away from the block because he is so effective there. But he should be the only, really, of the 5 on the floor that is not somewhat of a stretch shooter. I just don't know that you can have 2 on the floor at the same time. And Turner does have he brings some things to the table to a team that wants Turner to be their Sabonis or to be a rim protector. So he's got some trade value. The guys that I think for the Pacers, other than Oladipo. Now, Oladipo's trade value, Derek, the assumption is that you would have to give up a lot to get him, so that hurts his trade value a little bit because there's question mark about his health. The 3 biggest pieces for the Pacers right now in terms of their trade value on the NBA market, in no particular order, are probably Aaron Holiday, Miles Turner – Turner probably be number 1 – and Goga. I think Goga still has actually a lot there. Goga Batadze has a lot of intrigue around the NBA with his skill set. But Miles Turner's right there in that trio.
Just to remind you, Bite or Bold Bleep is usually just kind of a rapid fire, so we just kind of go back and forth, 30 to 60 seconds.
Actually,
with a quick explanation.
That's what I think.
So I didn't know that we were going to get a State of the Pacers franchise address from that answer.
Well, that's Derek. That's what the people want.
Yeah, I do think
people want analysis.
Tell me if this makes sense, Jake.
If I had your knowledge, it would in fact be a brief segment.
I don't think Turner
expand
and Sabonis will be teammates. I think Sabonis is the better player. I think Turner has more trade value. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I think Turner more easily fits on other NBA teams than Sabonis does.
Yeah, you've got to kind of build around what it is.
Yeah, so that's why I think Turner's more of a tradable piece, but I do think that they will split that up. Final one, statement 3, Bite or Bold Bleep. Gender reveal parties
I think of your thoughts, Derek.
should be banned forever.
What was that?
Gender reveal parties should be banned forever.
1,000% agree. We now have our second natural – well, it's not a natural disaster because it's some idiot with pyrotechnics. But we have wildfires now from these ridiculous gender reveal parties. Let me offer you a public service announcement if you were somebody who is – and congratulations to you. If you are expecting your first child, your second child, your third child, a child in general, and you want to do the gender reveal, I understand the temptation and, quite frankly, the narcissism that comes with inviting everybody you've ever met to come over to the house for some lame, ridiculous attempt to get YouTube views by doing the gender reveal. And here is the bottom line, and the one thing that you probably need to remember that's just as important as it's a boy or it's a girl, and that is simply this: no one cares. Quit doing it. It's narcissistic. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely everything that's wrong right now with 2020, and we now have had not one but 2 major fires that are running rampant because these morons have no idea what they're doing. They should never be done again.
I echo everything that you just said.
Well,
that's the thing that we're going to 100% agree on this show.
Did you do one? You
no.
had a child. Did you
Our gender reveal party, we drove back out east.
I remember I was part of your pregnancy reveal party.
And we were, that's a story for a different day.
Well, you meant to text your wife about how you were going to tell your parents about it, and instead you texted me.
Yeah, so you're the first person that found out that I was having
Look, will you give me credit? I kept that very close to the Shop Indie vest.
We were driving out east. My wife had gotten a prenatal CF and gender test, and she got a phone call while we were passing New York State's largest prison.
Oh, really?
At least there was a sign that said that. And we found out that it was a boy.
Like, can you take tours?
There was a sign on the interstate. It said New York State's largest prison. I don't know if
like,
I always thought Rikers was the largest prison, but
well, I mean,
maybe they meant by landmass because it wasn't Rikers.
Is that a bragging right?
I don't know. But that's how we found out. And she turned to me and she said, we're having a boy.
Do the wardens make trades to try to get, our population now, I mean, we really had an increase this year.
Called my parents, told them we were having a boy. That was it. No pink and blue mist, or I didn't hit a baseball or, whatever else. Cut a cake.
Yeah, you didn't
kind of stupid.
Launch some flaming arrow through the air.
No.
First off, what kind of idiot thinks it's a good idea to do pyrotechnics shooting it into a dry brush area?
People are dumb. They don't care. They only care about themselves. A couple of thanks as we wrap up here. Obviously,
I love me some me, but I don't think anybody is going to care about that kind of thing.
Greg Rakestraw, ISC Sports Network, everybody here and the whole team for having us and making this possible for us. Corey Elliott, WGU Indiana, our friends Brian and Alex at the Shop Indy for coming on board with us. But just all of the listeners, now viewers, I guess, that supported us through the last couple of months. Our old bosses, Brett and Mike. I'm going to miss somebody, Jake, because I feel like I have so many people to thank over the last 7 or 8 months who have kind of helped us. Well, you should thank me because this show is impossible unless you would have begged me tearfully over the phone to come back.
We did have, when we were laid off back in January, we had a lot of support. Quite frankly, I was surprised by it. I was blown away by it. And, I was very appreciative of it. And that includes support from other people within the Indianapolis media that kind of rallied behind us to help us out and to just say that they would help us in any way they could to get us back. And I'm not necessarily sitting here saying that it's good to be sitting across and talking with you, but it's been fun. I mean, it was fun. We had fun when we did it, and we'll continue to have fun, and we appreciate people that came on board with it.
More episodes coming your way every single week here on ISC Sports Network, iscsportsnetwork.com, and the ISC Sports Network app. Until next time, Jake, we'll see you guys later.